Hi there, this is Jen, and thank you so much for stopping by today. Today I'm creating a card using some new products from Visible Image Stamps. These will be available on May 21st, but you can pre-order them right now. The stamp set that I'm using is called Where Flowers Bloom, and then I'm going to use a sentiment from Butterfly Effect, which is also a new stamp set. I love the stamp set. It's a little bit bigger than some of the other stamp sets, and the solid flower in particular is fairly large, and I'll show you that here in a second. The inks that I'm using are Distress Oxides, so I'm using Seedless Preserves, Mowed Lawn, and Picked Raspberry. So this is a 4¼ by 5½ card base or card panel, and the flower fits really nicely on it. What's great about the stamp set though is that you can it fits great for journaling or for scrapbooking, but it also is awesome on cards. So they're a little bit bigger, so they fill up a little bit more space, but they're really beautiful stamps. The one that I'm using I picked because I absolutely love all of the detail that they put into the stamps. There's the floral, and then there's a little bit of a splatter effect, and then there's some writing in the stamp. It's just super, I just love. So what I'm going to do is I prep my card panel with a anti-static bag. And the paper that I'm using is some Canson XL watercolor paper. I'm using the smoother side. It's sometimes harder to stamp on watercolor paper. And I could have used Bristol for this, which is what I would normally do, but I don't know, I wanted to use watercolor paper today. So I'm going to stamp up the Distress Oxides, and I'm going to put this flower 3 times on the panel in the 3 different colors of oxide inks. Oxide inks are not great stamping inks. They stamp a little bit better than the Distress inks because they're a little bit juicier than the Distress inks, but they still are not the best ink for stamping. So I put the ink down on the flower, and then I'm going to take my water bottle and spritz a few different areas, and then I will take my paintbrush to kind of move that color out and get a little more coverage on that image. And then once I have colored out a little bit of the ink with water, I am going to put some clear embossing powder over that. And the embossing powder is mainly going to stick in the areas where it is still wet from that water. Most of the, or some of the stamp, the portions that I did not use the water on are too dry, so it's not going to clear emboss everything. But the reason that this works is because embossing powder is basically tiny little pieces of plastic that when you heat them up, they melt. So whether you're using a Versamark or an embossing ink or a liquid like water, that liquid is basically just holding the particles of embossing powder. And so when you heat it, it's going to still melt exactly as if you were using an embossing ink. I love using water with embossing powder, especially for splatters, because it just gives a really organic look that you sometimes can't get with stamps. So it's going to have some shiny areas and then some areas that are flat where it did not get embossed. I went ahead and repeated the very same process for the other colors, which were Seedless Preserves and Mowed Lawn. And then I'm going to take some of the other kind of little decorative stamps in the set and use some of my Versafine Clair Nocturne. And the stamp is just sticking to my fingers, and so it was really easy to go ahead and stamp that up in several areas. So I'm going to use kind of the longer decorative stamp, and then I'm going to use the smaller one. It's got little wheels and a little bit of writing and some circles and just some really cool elements that really make the card stand out, I think. And then so once that's done, I was so afraid to do this first off because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not. But what I did was I took a Tombow, and the color I'm using is N45. It's kind of a darker gray color, but not quite black. And so I just went ahead and went for it. I had a lot of trouble trying to think what would be the best color for the background because I didn't want to leave it white. And I think the gray really complements the colors on the card, and so I'm glad I chose it. But I'm telling you, I was like, I don't want to have to do this card all over again if I ruin it by putting a color that I don't like on the background. But this turned out really nice. I think it gives a nice shadow effect. Hopefully it gives it a little bit of dimension behind those flowers by putting that color kind of in those deep areas of the flowers, or where they're where the petals are. And so I went ahead and I did that for the entire card. You can use a blender pen for this as well, but I just like using the water for it. So for the sentiment, I didn't want to cover up too much of the card, and so I wanted a smaller sentiment, and so I picked the sentiment from the stamp set called Butterfly Effect, which is another awesome new release. And it says, everything you do matters. And I use the same N45 Tombow marker to color that, and then I distress the edges with the Tim Holtz Distress Edger. And since this is watercolor paper and it's not the best quality, it's a Canson XL, which is pretty it's great for using, but sometimes it curls up a little bit more than maybe other papers do. So I wanted to make sure it was super adhered, and so I used my tape runner, and then I also used liquid glue to adhere that. I trimmed around the card just a tiny bit and put it on a gray card base. I added a little bit of some white paint Posca pen and some matte Nouveau drops, and that will finish the card off. I am so happy that this turned out fine. I really love all the colors. I love this stamp set. So I'll leave links below for all of the supplies I used if you'd like to go ahead and check that out. As always, if you like this video or found it informative, please go ahead and give a thumbs up. I really do appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with me, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much.